of techne. So, Jessica, you read to begin with.
Aristotle said that all humans by nature desire to see and to have seen, and this indicates that vision has an essential relationship to being. Aristotle articulated 5 main forms of knowledge, and each have their own kind of seeing. Aesthesis, a sensory apprehending. Empiria is experience, the knowing of particulars, the holding of things present. Techne, which is know-how pertaining to an artisanship, relates to that which is not yet present. The being of the object before it emerges, episteme, in the form of theoretical or scientific knowledge that involves the first principles or causes, also means to stand before, over, and against something. Sophia, in the form of the highest wisdom and entails the knowing of all things, the seeing of universals, and hence is difficult for most to see, as this state is the most removed of the senses.
So in each form of knowledge, there's a mode of seeing. So techne is seeing the things in advance of appearance. Sophia is seeing things from many different points of view.
How's the episteme different from techne?
Episteme is technical and scientific knowledge, seeing things from above. So techne is seeing things in advance of appearance. So techne is related to poiesis. So Heidegger, for instance, talks about techne poiesis. Aesthesis is the basis of the word aesthetics. So episteme is the basis of epistemology.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, because it's like knowledge of the system as opposed to almost like the equipment of the system, which is the techne. Which, I mean, that's how we use it, isn't it?
Yeah. So techne, a mode of seeing in advance of appearing is one way of someone take this one next. So it's on techne. Jessica, you just do this last one, then you won't do it again. It's a long one.
Techne and logos become the root meaning of the word technology, but in many respects, this points to a radical transformation of the original Greek meaning. In Aristotle, techne is a form of knowledge that pertains to the know-how of making and producing. It has as its object something that needs to undergo a change, but this in turn relates to what is prior to the productive process or deals with what comes before actual formation. Before the act of making, there is a form of deliberation in which the artisan must first contemplate how the thing or product will appear. Aristotle refers to this as the seeing of eidos, or the eidos in the soul. As a mode of seeing, it is advance of the object, a vision of an object yet to be. This is why techne is in part related to poiesis. Techne is not simply an activity of making undertaken by a human subject, but is also poiesis, a bringing forth out of concealment. Techne is not mere human activity, but a bringing forth to a coming, a future, and an arrival. Both techne and experience are kinds of knowing. Experience is the knowing of particulars, techne of universals. In Aristotle, there is a qualitative leap from the seeing of particulara and the seeing of universals. Techne, or technical know-how, manipulation and production, is one modality of truth. Through techne, man discloses something and in so doing brings it into presence.
Lester.
Etymologically, the verb design is derived from the prefix "de" and the Latin verb "signare", which means to mark, mark out, or sign. aesthetics, all the things that can be claimed outside of the condition of rule.
It's a very important notion, really.
And what does it mean?
Well, I mean, in a way, the idea of genius is that which makes up its own rule. So aesthetics is related to autonomy and the creation of the own rule for a form, or so that's the root of autonomy and aesthetic coming to be. So a kind of a way of inventing rule rather than accepting rule. So it's anti-habitual.
Mm.
So not the facts about art, but instead a speculation on the nature of art. That's aesthetics rather than art history. Art does not only reflect the historical passage it derives from, but it also produces a new sense of being in time, all in ways which are unpredictable. So that's the differentiation between art and art history as a way of trying to understand the speculative nature of the work of art. Lester.
Art is concerned with the production of difference, whereas technology secures the production of the self-same. This in turn articulates the difference between meditative and calculative thinking.
So technology is related to calculation, whereas aesthetic thinking is invariably meditative.
Modernity was in part constructed around the imaginary of a utopian future. This image of the future was invariably born out of a fusion of art, design, and technology.
So this is one manifestation, a sort of utopian manifestation, Malevich's Black Square from 1915, 2 years before the revolution. So the idea not only of revolution, but the dawning of a new age. And this is Tatlin's monument to the Third International, which was never built.
It really looks like Anish Kapoor's Olympic Stadium sculpture.
That's what he was. That's what he was aspiring towards.
Except it's much more attractive than the Olympic Stadium sculpture.
I mean, don't get me onto this one.
Well, it's so annoying because I can see it out of my bedroom window since I moved.
Oh, you're
so
lucky. You're lucky.
It's like this ever-present reality to me now. So I'm having a hard time ignoring it.
The sun, as the expression of the old world energy, is torn down from the heaven by the modern man, who, by virtue of his technological superiority, creates his own energy source. That's Elvazitsky. So it just shows the extent to which there was a fusion between technology and aesthetic, experiencing this relationship to a future, an unknown future. This is Laszlo Moholy, Light Space Modulator from 1930. Very much a machine aesthetic. The beginnings of also a kind of, it's a moving machine. So it casts shadows. This is a still from Diego Vertov, Man with the Movie Camera. So also this vision gave rise to montage and a kind of fusion between the human and the machine, the root of this idea of montage. Soviet theories of montage aligned aesthetic perception with the rhythms of industrial production. That's from Einstein's film Strike. Total Design, Laszlo Moholy. So it's a faculty department in Desu, so Bauhaus. This is still today a classic, one of the most famous chairs of the 20th century, the Barcelona chair from 1929, still being produced today. What makes it into, who's an admirer of this chair?
Me.
Extol its virtues.
Well, I mean, one thing about Mies van der Rohe, he had just an incredible sense of detail and proportion, just impeccable. And it can't be done by rule, and it's just something completely personal to him. And the other thing that he was able to combine it with, and you can particularly see it in some of the houses they did around, well, in fact, the Barcelona Pavilion, which is where this chair went, was the incredible and rich use of detail and material, just incredibly expensive materials, but just an unerring sense of how to mix the materials together to get an effect. So it's not something you can teach anybody, but it's incredible to see.
I mean, the craft, the sense of craft is supreme. It's industrial material, or material which is often thought of as mass production material, but it's crafted and sort of immaculate.
I'm a major fan of Mies van der Rohe. And I think in some ways his aesthetics are quite similar to Louis Barragan in terms of the purity of the lines, the simplicity, which actually ends up making the object like a technical, amazing invention, because that is super hard to achieve that in design. It's timeless in some ways as well.
Except with Barragan, and again, because I'm an architect, I have strong, not necessarily correct, but I have strong views on this. There's similarities with Barragan, but Barragan defined space with color, which is not something that Mies van der Rohe ever did.
True, he's a modernist. My background is as an interior architect, so I'm a fan of chairs, and I'm a fan of this type of very pure line and simplicity, which lets you breathe, but at the same time have got so much identity in a space, in otherwise perceived as being minimal. Anyway, I'm a fan. And you were part of the Bauhaus as well.
So this is the Barcelona Pavilion. Could you talk about this a while? Someone talk about this pavilion. Who's seen it?
I have, and I went to a gala dinner actually that was held inside the pavilion. It was great. It was a temporary pavilion built for whatever World's Fair, and it was demolished thereafter, but they rebuilt it about 20 years ago. And you can see the book match marble here in the photos, which, I mean, to do that takes incredible thought and care, and the travertine floor and the stainless steel cruciform columns in front of you and the Barcelona chair that we've talked about. And I forget the sculptor's name of the sculpture to the right.
Is it Laurens?
Sorry?
Is it Laurens?
I don't remember now.
French sculptor thing.
And as I say, it's meant to be, it's part of an exhibition, it's a International World's Fair, so it's not meant to be a house for living in, so it's not very practical. And there was a house that Mies van der Rohe did around the same time in Czechoslovakia, in Brno, the Tugendhat House, which is of a similar stature in the architectural world as this. And what Mies van der Rohe did, and maybe that's why he was such a good architect, is he ignored the functionality of what a building needs to be, and he just concentrated on the idea. And it really is breathtaking when you're there. It's a stunning work. But his buildings, and let's say the National Gallery in Berlin, stunning building, great space on the main level, but all the artwork has to go in the basement because you can't really put it up on the main level. But in a way, if he tried to solve everything, they wouldn't be great works of art and architecture, but he doesn't, and it is brilliant when you're there.
The red-blue chair, a Rietveld. Could anyone advocate for this?
And do you show the Schroeder house in a subsequent slide? in Utrecht?
I don't know if I do. Don't think so.
And again, taking Marie's point about the use of color, Gerrit Rietveld as an architect did that. And his best-known architectural work, which follows the ideas of this chair, is what's now known as the Rietveld Schroeder House, but is now was for the Schroeders in Utrecht in the Netherlands, and again uses color in this distill sort of way to define the space. So it has its influences, a Mondrian type of influence and a Bauhaus type of influence.
Did someone read this?
I read.
Yeah.
Design is a process of thinking as much as a process of doing. Thinking works in relationship to what hasn't been thought. The process aims at a maximum condition of elegance. Elegance might be described as the union of sensibility and intelligibility. It gives rise to the thought that the object couldn't or shouldn't be otherwise. Design is only truly creative at the point at which it introduces a new principle. No matter how small, design in this regard is a form of alterness to process. Good design enters into its own field and adds to the syntax of its field. It implies the expansion of the language used to consider this field. Design is coherent because it eliminates problems and thus can describe its own outcome as such. The problem-solving dimension with this might either be visibly displayed or not. Design is part of a matrix of adaptive behavior. Design implicates itself within the constellation of behavior and is attentive to the possibility that it might change patterns of behavior. Both calculative and meditative thinking are required within design. The object has to find passage through being declared as much as erased or suspended. A type of oscillating state that defies straightforward instrumental analysis. This is what prevents design from being a form of technology, even though the technological component might be considerable.
Thank you for that. So that was just my attempt to designate what good design is. It's just a kind of short manifesto. So innovation next. Who's going to read?
I can read innovation. Innovation is associated with either the process or the product of design and is defined by the idea of introducing something new or for the first time. Innovation in this light can be coupled with originality, which is defined as a quality that comes from having preceded all others in time. Thus, originality is about a point of departure or a tracing back to the origin, whereas innovation does not touch upon this reduction or return to, but is rather associated with progression or advancement. Science fiction as a cipher of anxiety for the inhuman, non-human, post-human, and the anti-human.
So this is from Fritz Lang's Metropolis from 27. Again from Metropolis, which had a great impact on later science fiction films. One of the first, projection of scale and immensity of the future. So the idea of the impossible future. So the impossible future is a projection of the new as a goal, not so much of a particular new thing or product, but the new as such of the future, which, although the future can never be actualized, is positive as as though it could arrive. It's William McNeill. Again, from Metropolis. So the spectacle of mass assembly, architecture, sound, and aesthetics, the aestheticization of politics. So we've been through the Nazi reconfiguration of technology merging into aesthetics. So for Picasso, the horrors of aerial devastation shattered the rational core of modernist society, opening out a sense of mythic-like wounding of the social body. So in many ways, Guernica was turning back to the mythic. So it inverted the modernist early form of purity and fusion of technology and aesthetics. It kind of disavows this and presents a mythic image of war. Joseph Stalin said, "The writer is the engineer of the human soul." So this idea of engineering, a conflation of engineering with the human soul, is very much a trademark of Stalin's idea of aesthetic. And with it, a sense of censoring the aesthetic realm, enhancing a technological apparatus. At the center of this is the construction of the machinery of war. And we get with this emergence of the Second World War of the atomic explosion, a form of techno-sublimity, the projection of pure force and power. And with it, bigger, faster, further, as a sort of outcome of social progression. With this idea of advancement through bigger, better, faster, further, get technological exploration of space. Howard Hughes was a unique figure in the way he combined speed, scale, and moving image in his different roles of aviator and filmmaker. Aviator. This was his construction of the world's largest airplane. Statement from Don DeLillo, the great American novelist. So we get this vision of bigger, better is a kind of often biblical stories and mythic stories are kind of mixed with technology of special effects. So the archaic and the technological advance kind of fuse, another kind of fusion, which is not like early modernism, a kind of more epic, dirty, post-historical. Someone read this. Interface.
Interface, originally coined in the 1880s as a scientific term for the surface along which two adjacent bodies meet. The term interface was taken up by the nascent discipline of ergonomics in the late 1940s to describe a site at which the human body interacts with a complex mechanical apparatus. The interface is a crucial but often overlooked element in what ergonomics identifies as man-machine system. It is a hyphen between man and the machine that articulates the system as a whole. John Howard Span. Given the title Consultant Director of Design, Noyes was charged with entirely reinventing IBM's pyramidal hierarchy into a more horizontal, efficient structure. Noyes thus coordinated the redesign of the entire environment of IBM on a telescoping scale, from stationery and curtains to products such as typewriters and computers to laboratory and administrative buildings. IBM was literally to become simply the best in modern design. John Howard.
Continue.
No, sorry.
Continue.
Yes. Noyes steps to good design. 1. Fulfills its function. 2. Respects its materials. 3. Is suited to methods of production. 4. Combines these in imaginative expression.
This is IBM, a presentation of the Eames office. So Eames didn't just do design of chairs and furniture, but also design of a whole way of looking at a system. So kind of beginnings of a way of presenting a whole system and outlook of advanced information systems production. So it was a World Fair. So it's IBM. So again, this idea, vision of total design. So you can see, go on.
Sorry, Jonathan. So I didn't mean to interrupt. What I meant to say, for the younger people on this call, they won't understand the symbology of the egg on top. The old IBM typewriters, before the days of computer, was in advance on the typewriter, had this little ball which looked like that big egg. And that's where all the letters on the typewriter came from. So they used that idea for this pavilion.
I mean, in many ways, there's 3 phases of design, total design. The earliest Soviet model of total design, sort of futurist fusion between technology and aesthetics. The regressive totalitarian move towards a fusion, and a post-war American fusion. There's a critique of this model. So the film Alphaville by Jean-Luc Godard, which presents a society of eternal presence. So this is the early 1960s. So it's a society ruled by a computer, Alpha 60, in which it eliminates the past and the future. Logos is of eternal presence, in which all sentiment is erased. So it's a society without sentiment or emotion. So a society without memory. Alphaville, silence, logic, security, prudence. So it's the statement, no one has lived in the past and no one will live in the future. It's 1963 or 4 when this film was made, I think. This is the computer speaking. Can someone read some of this?
Memory is so called because of the primary role it plays in the logical organization of Alpha 60. No one has lived in the past. No one will live in the future. The present is the only form of life. It is a state of existence which is indestructible. Time is like a circle, endlessly turning. The arc that descends is the past. That which rises is the future. All has been said unless words change their meanings and meanings their words. It is not obvious that someone in the ordinary course of life, living on one edge of pain, should demand a different kind of religion from that demanded by someone who in the ordinary course of life lives on the other edge. Before we were here, there was nothing, no one. We are totally alone here. We are unique here, terrifyingly unique. The meaning of words and expressions is no longer understood. An isolated word or an isolated detail in a drawing can be grasped, but the meaning of the whole escapes us. Once we know one, we think that we know two, because 1 + 1 = 2. We forget that we must first know what plus is. The meaning of words and expressions is no longer understood. An isolated word or an isolated detail in a drawing can be grasped, but the meaning of the whole escapes us. Once we know one, we think that we know two, because 1 + 1 = 2. We forget that we must first know what plus is. Did I just read that?
Yes.
So ADHD, so sorry. Men, by their own actions over the centuries, will gradually be destroyed. I, Alpha 60, am only the logical means of that destruction.
Marie, just the conclusion from Adorno.
The one of the technical world possesses an ahistorical aspect that enables it to serve as a mythical mirage of eternity. Planned production seems to purge the life process of all that is uncontrollable, unpredictable, incalculable in advance, and thus to deprive it of what is genuinely new, without which history is hardly conceivable. Theodor Adorno.
Stanley Kubrick, Space Odyssey from '68. In 1967, the Beatles recorded All You Need Is Love live on television broadcast. It was the first music to be recorded live and broadcast across the networks of the world. So it was a live recording the song, and it was projected through transmission. So it's a sort of utopian moment, really. So just shortly after this, Hendrix developed his guitar playing into what was termed heavy metal. 3 chemicals or substances altered in the 1960s: the birth control pill, LSD, and napalm, each in their different ways symbolized this decade. Techno noir. Weekend from '67 by Jean-Luc Godard was a black comedy which based on a journey into the countryside in which a couple encountered a huge multiple car crash that looked like a scene from a war zone. It was at the time the longest single continuous shot in cinema. It was about 28 minutes long, continuous shot of a car crash. It's a statement from J.G. Ballard: sex times technology equals the future. This is David Bowie in a film, The Man Who Fell to Earth, from 1976. This is Blade Runner from 1982, which was one of the first films which people talked about the idea of postmodernity in relationship to it. The whole riddle is the role of Harrison Ford. Is he a machine or is he a human? So this is the influence of the earlier film by what's the name now, the filmmaker. But it's like a fusion between the cities of Tokyo, Los Angeles, and New York.
Is this Blade Runner?
Blade Runner. That's a single shot from early image in Blade Runner.
If I can come in here, the beginning scene of Blade Runner, I remember I watched it in the States, and it's so much Los Angeles, like when the plane comes into Los Angeles, this vast, spread out, the city scene of Los Angeles. So it was always referred as LA, New York, and Tokyo all together.
Jean-Luc Marion states that today the image covers the surface of the earth in addition to the surface of the eyeball of the inhabitants of the world, only insofar as it produces itself, multiplies itself, and expands without restriction or reference. The condition of the image is a form of liberation for every original, because the image is valued in itself and for itself. So it's without indexicality. This is still from Videogram by Cronenberg. The character says the television screen is the retina for the mind's eye. Therefore, television screen is part of the physical structure of the brain. This is Neuromancer by William Gibson. We've got to remember that a lot of the terms for virtual reality come from literature like William Gibson. He says the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. The idea of techno-futurism, this is Man Machine by Kraftwerk. So you get this reference to early Soviet futurism and Bauhaus and sort of electronic pop. The performance of them. Alpha Elias and the Weather Project in the Tate. It's one of the most successful and popular events in the Tate Hall. And here's Jessica's bedroom window view, which was meant to be a fusion of architecture, technology, and aesthetics, but
they forgot the aesthetics.
But
they forgot the aesthetics.
better forgotten. I like the photograph. This is Mariko Mari, Infinite Energy, 1, 2, 3, from 2013. Jessica, you read this.
The shiny is a presentation that resists the image of erosion, of the process of aging, the stain of time. It thus emblazes a sense of eternal nowness and as such represents an ahistorical imaginary. As both a symbol and as an appearance, it stands in opposition to both decay and ruination. As such, it has the look of progress that is combined with the erasure of memory. It mirrors everything but reflects nothing.
Anish Kapoor, Cloudgate. Designer Ron Arad, who used to be professor of design in the Royal College. Again, Ron Arad. Again, Ron Arad. Contemporary culture is witnessing not only the growth of luxury products and services, but also the price competition related to works of art. Many of the most successful artists produce items for the announcement of labels so that the name is given over to various logos. This is when Damien Hirst put his whole did a whole production for Sotheby's, filled the Sotheby's with his work. And it fetched over $100 million, £100 million, in fact. Just before it was just at the moment of the crash, banking crash. Jessica.
Contemporary art is distinguished by the fact that art no longer exists within a boundary condition that used to be termed avant-garde, but is now part of the economic and cultural centre. Economically, art is an important indice in the development of wealth and the growth of city-states. Not only are mediums and technologies mutating, but the whole apparatus of art itself is losing boundary definitions. We are entering into a new technological and political stage, so the question of how and where art locates itself is central.
This is Jeff Koons' Vuitton bags. There's Vuitton at the moment has this interesting window on Bond Street. Vuitton bag. The BMW car. Murakami produces a vast array of artworks and products that involve a complex network of production sites and technology. He employs, or did employ, over 200 to 300 people in his studio complex. One of his productions. There's a Richard Prince in a Vuitton bag. Designers either appear to appeal to the taste for saturation or excess or reduction and purity. Such codes are continually in circulation, defining the process of good and bad taste. Let me just read this.
Capitalism fosters and feeds off both sides of the affective divide. It should be noted that on both sides, capitalism goes for excess, surplus value. The surplus value extracted from both sides of the cleavage is formally identical. In a certain sense, capitalism restores the unity of or continuity of excess self-activity. Capital doesn't just valorize technology. It is itself an abstract technology of access, as qualitative in its operation as it is quantitative, as subjectively restorative in a maniacal kind of way, as it is objectively destructive ecologically.
Logo, image, product, brand. There's Memphis. There's Versace, his heyday, or he was murdered. This is factory, workshop, studio, laboratory. This is a studio of Damien Hirst, one of his giant yacht painting works. Donald Judd. It's Anthony Gormley's studio. I'm whisking through this quickly now because we need to have some time for discussion. Photography is our exorcism. Primitive society had its masks, bourgeois society its mirrors. We have our images. We believe we can overpower the world with technology, but through technology, the world has imposed itself upon us, and the surprise effect generated by the reversal has been considerable. Jean Baudrillard, photographed by Gursky. A photograph is the universe of dots, the grain, the halide, the little silver things clumped in the emotion. Once you get inside the dot, you gain access to the information. You slide into the smallest event. This is what technology does. It peels back the shadows and redeems the days, rumblings of past. It makes reality come true. Sarah Z. When you invent the ship, you also invent the shipwreck. When you invent the plane, you also invent the plane crash. And when you invent electricity, you invent electrocution. Every technology carries with it its own negativity, which is invented at the same time as its technical progress. Paul Virilio. This is a project where an ordinary toaster is made up of all these separate parts, and the designer set about seeing what it would take to actually fabricate each of the parts separately from mass production.
Products appear seamless and without blemish. Unlike a craft object, there is no sign of production, just its fact, like status and appearance, that announces with its package newness. The first industrial revolution was with steam power. The second was electronic. The third, information. And the fourth is based on artificial intelligence and biotechnology. These new technologies try to make virtual reality more powerful than actual reality, which is a true accident. The day when virtual reality becomes more powerful than reality will be the day of the big accidents. Mankind never experienced such an extraordinary accident. One of the effects of living with electric information is that we live habitually in a state of information overload. There is always more than you can cope with. Marshall McLuhan.
The mainframe computer.
Everywhere we remain unfree and chained to technology, whether we passionately affirm or deny it. But we are delivered over to it in the worst possible way when we regard it as something neutral. For this conception of it, to which today we particularly like to do homage, makes us utterly blind to the essence of technology. Heidegger, Martin Heidegger. Shall I carry on, or are you tired?
You're reading well.
Okay.
I can read this because I read the Don't Delete White
Okay,
Noise.
go ahead.
The book
Okay, go
itself.
ahead.
This is the whole point of technology. It creates an appetite for immortality on the one hand. It threatens universal extinction on the other. Technology is lost removed from nature. Don't delete white noise. Global city-state whose economies exceed more national economies. Each of these cities are centers of art and design display, open with new museums as a cultural focus. One of the main features of late modernity is the increased tendency towards the mutation or merger of the realm of technology, art, design, and image culture.
This is Frank Gehry's foundation of Louis Vuitton in Paris. It's like a giant sailing ship on the edge of a park. The Digital Museum in Paris. It's awful. Leave that. Cybernetics comes from the Greek word meaning governance. It provides the means of examining design and function of any system. And the third technological revolution, Internet of all things. Marie.
If I had told you 25 years ago that in a quarter century's time, 1/3 of the human race will be communicating with one another in huge global networks of hundreds of millions of people, exchanging audio, video, and text, and that a combined knowledge of the world would be accessible from a cell phone, that any single individual could post a new idea, introduce a product, or pass a thought to 1 billion people simultaneously, and that the cost of doing so will be nearly free, you would have shaken your head in disbelief. All are now reality. Jeremy Rifkin.
Continue.
But what if I were to say to you that 25 years from now, the bulk of the energy you use to heat your home and run your appliances, power your business, drive your vehicle, and operate every part of the global economy will likewise be nearly free? That's already the case for several millions early adopters who have transformed their homes and businesses into micro power plants to harvest renewable energy on site. Even before any of the fixed costs for installation of solar and wind are paid back, often in as little as 2 to 8 years. the marginal cost of the harvested energy is nearly free. Unlike fossil fuels and uranium for nuclear power, in which the commodity itself always costs something, the sun collected on your rooftop, the wind traveling up the side of your building, the heat coming up from the ground under your office, and the garbage anaerobically decomposing into biomass energy in your kitchen are all nearly free. Jeremy Rifkin. The enormous leap in productivity is possible because emerging Internet of Things is the first smart infrastructure revolution in history. One that will connect every machine, business, residence, and vehicle in an intelligent network comprised of a communications internet, energy internet, and logistics internet, all embedded in a single operating system. In the United States alone, 37 million digital smart meters are now providing real-time information on electricity use. Within 10 years, every building in America and Europe, as well as other countries around the world, will be equipped with smart meters. And every device, thermostats, assembly lines, warehouse equipments, TVs, washing machines, and computers will have sensors connected to the smart meter and the Internet of Things platform. In 2027, there were 10 million sensors connecting every type of human contrivance to the Internet of Things. In 2013, that number was set to exceed 3.5 billion, and even more impressive, by 2030, it is projected that 100 trillion sensors will connect to the lot. Given that data is a new currency, the Internet of Things is an epic power grab by the lords of the network, the big five of Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft, to gain as much data as physically possible. Justin McGeoch.
Designing new identities and being mined for outcomes. World War III is a guerrilla information war with no division between military and civilian participation. This was a projection by Marshall McLuhan already in the 60s. Let's see. Short bibliography.
That was a great presentation. It makes me think of a company called TeamLab, which I met several years ago when they just started. And they happened to be a Japanese collective working with engineers, technicians, designers, artists, and making the most amazing installations worldwide, with messages very much on the environment, but also on their cultures, Japanese culture. TeamLab, have a look, it's fabulous. And that, I think it's a successful collaborative on design, aesthetics, and technology. I put it in the chat.
TeamLab has just opened their company in China.
Who have?
TeamLab.
Yes. Okay.
Have you guys used the ChatGPT? It's a website and designed by OpenAI. So it's a AI inside website, and you type any questions inside, then this robot can give you a reaction, and it's not like Siri in the mobile phone, but you can refine the conversation and refine the robot's reply. And recently, I'm trying to use it. I think it's very interesting to me.
And what's the name of the website?
ChatGPT. Let me type in the.
Yeah, I mean, that's a revolutionary technology. I think it's because although it just regurgitates information from what's been previously posted, so it's just it's database. It's not capable of generating anything new, but it it's so efficient, and like you say, you can ask it anything and get a incredibly tailored and bespoke response. And so it kind of raises the question of when will we hit the tipping point where it's just easier to offload your thinking to this software than it is to bother to think about it yourself.
It's like the technology now is on stream whereby you can get essays written in the style of a 12-year-old or a professor or about to make.
Actually, there's a guy use the ChatGPT to try to post a dissertation on a very, very good, I cannot remember the magazine, and its success. And I heard in some university in USA, the professor allowed students to cooperation with the ChatGPT to finish some thesis. So yeah, I think people are very excited about this website.
There are many universities in the US, like they set the rule saying that you should not use ChatGPT to take the test or dissertation, but they don't really have a very effective tool to check if they use or not, because it is already very intelligent and the Turing test is already passed. And also our like the checking system that we used to have, because the ChatGPT is too much like human nature, and it just passed and cannot find it like as a
simulate mistakes as part of its presentation.
Also
other signature feeling.
Yeah, it's so interesting with education. It's
Same
one
thing.
thing for it to come in now, and having already had a training of thinking for yourself. But what if you were just coming up now? Like, you may never learn to think for yourself in the first instance.
Two things I'd like to share. Very similar story in New Zealand. The university here, actually quite a bit of debate going on, the essay assisted by this chat GPT thing. So media here has constant debate on the university essay writing. The other one, the second thing is the personal experience. My husband recently had to write a speech on certain things. He wrote thing and shared with the family. Hey, what do you think? And my son came big with, Dad, you need to do this, this, this. And he shared the speech written by his AI program. And then my husband goes, it's all so flowery, so nice word, but no substance. And then he came up with a strategy to deal with it by putting a lot of personal anecdote. The chatbot AI doesn't have this personal experience that my husband had along the way. So we thought, that's not a bad idea to actually cope with. Personally, I think some paragraph from the AI was just beautifully written. So I did say, why don't you incorporate this into your speech? Personal experience.
Yeah, it's a real game changer. Real game changer.
It could revise the purposes of art education and creative thinking, as opposed to logical thinking. In a way, it sort of conquers method, this technology, but doesn't it doesn't teach you how to think. It replicates how to think.
Like your shiny objects.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame because I personally love shiny objects. So you've just destroyed them for me.
Just destroyed it.
I went actually to see Patrick was in an exhibition and at the Winter Sculpture Garden in out sort of southeast of London, and the pieces which I liked best there were shiny, and there was but it was because the effect that they had. There was one that were these like sort of tall towers, like big tall apartment towers, kind of abstracted and made out of metal and cut out. So it's kind of a lattice work anyway, but they just kind of disappeared when you put them in the grass because the metal all reflected the grass, and the object kind of lost its substance, which I think is what appeals to me. So, there's a sort of vaporizing of the material when it's reflective, which I quite like.
What about this thing of different phases? What the different phases add up to? Is there a logical pattern, or is it unpredictable? What's the relationship between the predictability of hybrid and technological fusion of aesthetics and design and technology?
I think there will be more mixture inside of all the fields, like all the fields are mixing, and like not only in art, but maybe also like in finance, you should learn coding. And if you are teaching, and you should learn a lot of other things. It's a mixture of all the abilities.
Yeah,
together.
I think that's a very interesting point because that's been a massive impact of technology so far, is that on the one hand you lose like the individuality of craftsmanship when you create software that allows you very easily to accomplish a task which hands-on would have taken a long time to do. But the consequence, or one of the consequences of that, has been that we are now able to be multimedia. We're able to cover many more topics because the amount of energy you need to get skillful in a topic is reduced because technology takes the cognitive load off of you, and therefore allows you to cover a wider variety of topics. So I think there is that interconnection, and presumably if this AI technology is going to really radically reduce the cognitive load, maybe that would be one outcome, that you'll see some individuals who will cover great territories of knowledge and different disciplines, because you'll be able to cover a lot more because it will take you less energy to cover each one.
And I think that all the technologies are just tools. It is just like invention of oil paint. Like they are just new materials for people. And for artists, also for human beings, are that we have the ability of predicting and also know the consequences and making the choices.
Mm.
But we're also heading towards societies of the greatest control that's ever been exerted in history. I mean, with digital facial recognition, if you cross the road in Beijing,
Yeah.
you find through your instantly it finds through your cell phone because it picked up your transgression.
Not only in Beijing, even people who go to the Trafalgar Square for the what does it called for the event,
Yeah.
they are being captured already. And I think maybe the UK government also have the image, but they don't tell you.
Mhm. I think the other thing I'd say is that, you know, you don't need to directly control people when you can just manipulate them by sending them images and advertising and targeted information. So, you know, that can be just as effective as a totalitarian approach.
I met a PhD candidate recently at the RCA, and her thesis is going to be on facial recognition. She takes it on a colonization and racism point of view. And we had a little chat and looking how all those technologies are actually designed by, you know, white, male, blah, 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 and how actually discriminates against different facial colors and shapes according to this. And racism in technology is something I had never thought of, really, even though I've been through airports and, you know, I've had the occasional, but I never really looked at it as being racist, but it is. And I thought it was very interesting how technology can be apprehended like this, because there are people behind technology creating it according to their own values and view of the world. And that is quite scary when it's one extreme or the other.
There was always in photography, in the technology of photography, a kind of discriminatory factor about how light is reflected and how just images either pick up pigments in skin or don't.
I had that conversation in a lecture recently with Olivier Richon. He was talking about all processes of photography, blah, 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 and the universality of it. But the first films were created for white people, and absolutely, they did not work on different skin colors, and it took forever for this to actually evolve. So yeah, it's interesting. Racism and technology, I mean, it's scary, but it's a real thing too.
It reminds me of a story that I heard from a schoolmate of my former university in the US, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I don't remember if it is my school or is it my teacher said that there is a school who used to hold a course that is for people to design the way of torture. And then it was banned because anything can be a very much a design of torture, or maybe it is a criticism about the design of torturing. So the course, I don't remember which it is, but it was banned. But it's actually raise a question of like it is about humanity stuff, like how do you choose, because everything can be a torture, everything can be a harmful weapon. So also there is a constantly debating in the U.S. Talking about the guns law. It's some people think it's a defense of ourselves, and some said it's of course a banned thing. And in the UK it is banned, but it still appears. So yeah, it's a question for everyone, and to raise up about our humans like thinking of what is the consequence.
But it's like in Jonathan's presentation, talking about the polarity of technology, the good and the bad, and one brings another extreme, because as human, I think we are either or. I read an article 2 weeks ago and I was looking for it. I can't find it. I think it was either in The Guardian or in the New York Times, talking about a new robot, a new AI technology, trying to replace dating apps and being interactive. And the journalist, who was very skeptical about it, tried the program because it hasn't been launched to the public yet. And he actually fell in love with the AI. And he freaked out, thinking, that's only a few weeks ago. And he freaked out thinking, how can it feel so human? And the AI came up with very spontaneous human answers, which were actually quite sophisticated. And he fell in love with it, and he had literally to stop because he started being addicted to it. And I felt that, and he said that this is actually very scary, because he questioned, have we reproduced another kind of human, or entity or technology with emotions? Can it actually be reproduced? And there was another thing I read very briefly, which was about scientists who are developing mini robots to actually repair cancer cells. And they noticed that those mini cells can reproduce themselves now. Is it birth as we know it? So I'm fascinated by this, by technology and how far we take it. Like the book, Another World, Un Autre Monde, and, how, reproducing cells and to create children the way we want them to be and how it has evolved. It's very scary. But yeah, it is a tool which can be used in a good way and in a bad way, always, I think.
I believe there has been international or some national level of ethnic constellation for these designer babies. So it was a constant debate. Where does human divine creativeness coming with AI? But just if this helps you, Marie, to ease up your mind, there has been quite a strong ethnical grounded international debate and laws, and a lot of governments are actually banning to put a cap on development, cell reproduction, or that like a human organ farm sort of thing. There is ethnic constellation.
But I think it's fascinating, and thank you for that. But I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, of course.
How technology, in a way, replaces religion and beliefs and spirituality, and capitalism ultimately replaces it as a new belief, is it not? Because one would have believed that, but if you are, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, but you could be religious and believe that, birthing, etc., is a spiritual, natural thing. And now it's being assessed by the creators behind the robots, who effectively become the new gods and the new makers of the world. And it is all led by greed and capitalism, because those robots are to be sold or replace human labor. And I just think it's interesting to look at it as a triangle, like religion, capitalism, and technology as well. I know it takes away from art and aesthetics, but it's sold as well in a way which is so beautiful that it becomes design and attractive. Maybe I'm going too far on this, but
we're also beings which dysfunction, and the dysfunction is interesting rather than functionality. Dysfunction in terms of creative processes. Very often an aesthetic product is something which is based on misrecognition and non-identity rather than identity and a stably defined identity and fixed logic. So some total of mistakes which are made, or a mixture of misrecognition and recognition. But the artwork is never just built out of recognition and functionality. It's met by silence.
Because progress is also regression.
I feel this function is really also an important thing. So there's a lot of like capability of what people can do, and also especially for adults, we learned the things and we keep the track or keep the process of what we learned, but always we forgot to unlearn about things and maybe to find another way to make it better or something. And also that this function for the AI is also very important, because it should be set that some function should be this function.
Yeah, the AI replacement for a dating app is, that's really something, isn't it? Because, like previously, like having a physical robot that could, sufficiently mimic a real human being has always been so unattainable that, that like prevents a real blocker. But if you're now dealing with software that's sort of incredibly attuned to, mimicking and picking up on emotional cues, then, that could become convincing and preferable, because who wouldn't want to always have a conversation with somebody who said exactly what you wanted them to say, right? It's like, it's very tempting, isn't it?
And then the follow-up of it will be creating actual robots, like in sci-fi film, that becomes your lovers or...
Well, maybe you don't even need that. Maybe it just becomes imaginary, maybe the physical element disappears altogether. Like,
that would be a shame.
Your mind is already there. It's like, that's like, it's really interesting.
And so we need to remind ourselves that humans have bodies. We have 70, 80 years of lifespan and we die. The machines, that's the big dilemma. I don't have an answer, but this is a question. That humans have bodies. Another one is humans are emotional. A lot of things, we have all sort of logical thinking process, decision-making skills, etc. We learn. We still make very emotional decisions and we regret it. Or serendipity of life, sometimes what think was a bad decision turned out to be good, and what we think was a good decision turned out to be actually better in the end, that sort of thing. So these are two aspects that I'm actually thinking these days, especially reading Harari books on Homo Deus. Mari, we mentioned this a bit before, like humans with the biotechnology now have a ability to, increase human lifespan to 100, 120. Elon Musk and all the other people with all this money will put their money into say how to extend their lifespan to another 20, 50 years sort of thing. But the limitation we have, human, is I think twofold. One is we do have a physical body, and two, we are emotional being. So all this talk about AI or virtual dating, etc. Somehow, my belief is that we need to just keep reminding ourselves about true limitation of human.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I did my dissertation on how would we design computers differently if we came from an embodied view of reality rather than a, you know, Cartesian model. And so, you know, and I argued like very strongly in that you know, the body is fundamental, and not only that, but emotions are embodied. You know, you feel emotions in your body. When you recall memories, you feel them in your body. So it's not just a imaginary or mental exercise, and you can't dissociate those things, which I think is all probably true. But then, like the you know, our experience of reality, or what we take to be reality, is so open to like creativity and subjectivity. And so, you know, what's to say that the human mind can't make that leap, you know, and transcend, you know, I mean, even if it can't live forever, you know, can it transcend a physical limitation? I wonder, you know, and I'm not as sure as I was 2 years ago. I was very adamant that like this was a limit, but now I'm not sure. I'm not sure it is a limit. I wonder, I really wonder whether it is.
Well, I think that if you look at why are the apps existing in the first place, in the realm of love and etc., because people are more and more lonely in big cities, right? Loneliness is a major issue. So Tinder came along, which in my view fucked up the whole love scene. But this is me. I'm like anti all those apps, like, well. And therefore people are over consuming, like they'll go to the supermarket and get very heartbroken and disappointed, and it doesn't feel, so the physical only, because it's often the case with such app, doesn't feel the intellectual or that loneliness. So perhaps both, it's going to be Tinder physical and another app for intellectual, but to get a sense of wholesomeness. And I think it's super dangerous, because that every new app or robot or AI technology dealing with our emotion takes us further away from our humanity, from our
Well, I think the other thing is that you know, and this is something I wrote about in the dissertation, is that you know, there's an artist called Char Davies. Sorry, it's not Char Davies. It's I forget, somebody Dobson. Sorry. Anyway, she wrote a critique of like robots which were being used for sort of you know, elderly care in the home kind of thing. And one of her criticisms was that the robots are, you know, so that they're not threatening to humans, are always designed to be agreeable. And actually how that is very, very dangerous for the human psyche, because we need people who are not agreeable so that we don't just, you know, disappear into our own ego. We need people who are going to keep us in check. And if your robot is constantly affirming you, then that is itself a massive problem.
So you could get the John Cleese version of the robot to keep you in check.
Yes, exactly. You know, and that's why it's so dangerously appealing, because, you know, if you had a convincing partner to have a conversation with that only ever left you feeling good, would you not prefer that conversation to one which might not leave you feeling good? And in the world of dating apps, which is almost certainly not going to leave you feeling good. It's quite a gap, isn't it?
Very scary realms. But I do like the mention of robots are used in elderly homes, and in, you know, in a different way, not in a dating way, but in a care way. And because loneliness is a big deal, you know, it's a big deal in cities, it's increasing. And I think it's, in that sense, it could perhaps replace within memes, but not to replace a relationship. Yeah.
There was a program I looked at a little fragment of with interviews with people who'd gone online on very harmful content, hateful content, and they're often loners who've never had. They claim to never had a conversation between themselves and another person. They don't know how to have a conversation, so they spend thousands of hours online on often hate channels, but they've never had a conversation. So this idea of loneliness is also a kind of almost inbuilt biological kind of way of being now for large parts of the population, or a considerable undergrowth of the population. I was like with the campaign over Brexit. I mean, a lot of people had very strong belief structures, but these belief structures were all encoded into technological interface. So they were getting the information that they were coding into it. So they just received information that was tailored for they were, had a particular viewpoint, they get fed information. And so they felt that their information was, or their worldview was correct. So already there's a sort of mass movement where you get a majority of the population voting for something which becomes a sort of disaster in any empirical terms. So already populations are swayed by information in a way which is, there's no device which shows it's just information in circulation, or information which is tailoring itself technologically towards your viewpoint and reinforcing the viewpoint. Just break the topic for a moment. I've just had a conversation with Lai Chi Wan, and they're going to make 2-3 days available for us in July, where we can use the gallery for doing an event of some kind. So
Oh, that's so exciting.
Wow,
So-
July when, Jonathan? I'll be in UK until mid-July. That sounds so exciting.
I don't know. I've not been given the date yet because they've got to decide on their program before they give us a date. But they've agreed in principles to make the gallery available for 2-3 days for us. Gradually.
I hope it's the beginning of July, then I'll be very gladly be a part of it. Well done, nice, thank you.
Very
As soon
cool.
as I get the dates, we can start to think about what we do with the space. We could do a pop-up show with a performance evening or something like that.
Yeah, nice. But whilst we're on that topic, so we met with the group that's participating in the show at Kate's Place in May, and we wanted to bring it back to this group in terms of how we want to integrate that into this Monday night group activity. So I think when we were sort of thinking about this, sort of developing this exhibition, the idea is that, although we all, may produce individual works potentially, that we would, develop them in collaboration as a group, and we would use the group to provide critiques, as we develop ideas. So I think that's sort of something we talked about early on, but we just wanted to sort of bring it back to this group and to talk to you about it, Jonathan, in terms of, to what extent does do we want that group just to meet on its own to discuss, show stuff? And I think the practicalities we can keep out of this Monday night group, but it would be nice, I think, to like integrate it into the Monday night group somehow as well. We just need to think about how to do that in a way that doesn't alienate people who aren't able to participate in the show.
I mean, I think we could set, a quarter of an hour, half an hour aside every now and then to discuss it. If there could be a presentation made, someone acting as the mediator of the group.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be really nice to do crits. I mean, like maybe we do like 1 or 2 crits between now and May. And like that would have to take like a whole session, I think, to do that. But I think we get a lot out of that as a group. We get a lot out of having that feedback directly about our individual works. I think it's well worth the time.
So we set a day aside, a Monday aside, or make a special statement or whatever. There's no reason why we shouldn't as sort of Tuesday night.
We'll have 3 weeks to install the show. I think the crit during the installing could be more productive, like things will be happening and